Welcome to Spec to Success. This is the first video of hopefully many where I will break down every assessment point from the OCR specification to ensure you are prepared for any question that might come your way. So an example of this, just to give you a bit of background, is here. This is topic 1.1, the economic problem, and an evaluate point on the specification is the problem of scarcity and the requirement to make choices. The exam board can ask an 8 marker, a 12 marker, a 15 marker, even a 25 marker on this individual point in the specification. And we will be going through a question related to this topic today. So to give you a bit of background, over 60% of the entire marks in all your papers will come from evaluate questions. So it's crucial we score top marks in these areas to guarantee an A star. I'm assuming you already covered the basics, but if you haven't, don't worry. There are clear topic by topic notes available on the OfferTrack website. Now, let's evaluate this topic and really impress your examiners. So, there has been one question on the problem of scarcity and the requirement to make choices. And this has come from 2021 in microeconomics, and it goes, evaluate how the problem of scarcity can be used to explain the requirement to make choices between free goods and economic goods. Notice what I've written down here. Focus on between. It's a tricky question, and it's tricky because of its wording. By stating between, the examiner isn't just asking how scarcity leads to choices within each type of good, but how scarcity explains the difference in the nature of choices made between free goods and economic goods. So we're focusing on whether choices differ when dealing with free goods versus economic goods in the context of scarcity. Now, hopefully the question has become a bit clearer. And if it hasn't, don't worry, because we're going to be going through it in detail as the video goes on. So, introduction first. Remember, for intros, we need to show the examiner AO1, which is knowledge and understanding. And the best way to do that is just cram a bunch of definitions inside the introduction, just to show the examiner you know what you're talking about. You can ace this exam. So examples that we can use are the economic problem, which refers to unlimited wants and limited resources. That means there's a trade-off, or in economic terms, an opportunity cost every time a decision is made. An opportunity cost is the next best alternative forgone when making an economic decision. And economic goods are goods that are scarce relative to demand and involve an opportunity cost when consumed. Free goods, on the other hand, which by the way should not be confused with public goods, are goods that are abundant in supply and do not have an opportunity cost in consumption, so have no monetary value. All right, that's the intro done. For the introduction, the examiners are just looking for key knowledge, and your summing up of all the points are a waste of space in the introduction. Instead, they should be put at the end of the essay in the judgment in order to secure maximum marks in evaluation. So let's get into the core of the essay. Let's start by analyzing how choices differ when dealing with free goods versus economic goods in the context of scarcity. At the heart of the economic problem is the idea that resources are limited, but wants are unlimited. So when we use a scarce resource, we have to give something up, the next best alternative forgone, or what we call the opportunity cost. With economic goods, this is clear. Choosing to allocate money to build hospitals means you can't spend that same money on improving education. Or if a business uses land to build houses, that land can't be used for farming. The decision has to be made over where to allocate limited factors of production, and something is always sacrificed. That's what scarcity forces us to do. But with free goods, that's not the case. They're not scarce, so using them doesn't involve giving anything up. If I breathe air, or if I stand in the sun, I'm not taking those things away from anyone else. There's no choice, no trade-off, no opportunity cost. So in their purest form, scarcity doesn't apply to free goods, and that's why they don't require economic decisions. So to sum up, we know that economic goods are in limited supply, which means scarcity is really useful for explaining the need to make choices about these goods. On the other hand, free goods, because they aren't scarce, are less relevant when it comes to scarcity and choice. So scarcity is a powerful concept for economic goods, but is limited in its use for explaining choices around free goods. Okay, so let's take a step back and evaluate, because that's where the top marks come from. While scarcity is really useful in explaining why we make choices about economic goods, it's not completely irrelevant when it comes to free goods either. Here's why. Some goods that used to be free are no longer free, mainly due to rising populations or overuse. Take clean air, for example, which is a common access resource. 1,000 years ago, when populations were smaller and industrial activity was minimal, we didn't have to worry about clean air. But now, in places like Delhi and Beijing, air pollution is so severe that clean air has become scarce, meaning it now behaves like an economic good. Overuse has led to depletion and degradation. Remember that for the exam, the double Ds, depletion and degradation. That will get you top marks. So this depletion and degradation has led to the government being forced to spend billions on regulation, air filtration systems, and public health responses. This introduces a significant opportunity cost, because that money could have been spent on healthcare, education, or other priorities. In other words, we're now paying for something that used to be free. So, linking back to the question, this shows that the problem with scarcity can explain the requirement to make choices, not just between economic goods, but also for free goods as well. Because under certain conditions, free goods can become scarce. Now for the second analysis paragraph. For some context, the mark scheme for this question doesn't do this, but to hit 25 marks consistently, you need to include more than one piece of analysis. Let's look at it from a different angle, the role of price and how that helps us make decisions between economic goods and free goods. For economic goods, scarcity means that there's not enough to go around for free, so they have a price. That price reflects the goods scarcity, and it acts as a signal in the market, telling consumers and producers what to do. This brings in the cost-benefit principle. And remember that for the exam, because if you include that, the examiner is going to be seriously impressed. So the cost-benefit principle is where the marginal benefit of consuming or producing a good outweighs the marginal cost, including the opportunity cost. That's how resources are allocated in a market economy. Let's bring in a demand and supply diagram here to hit the top of AO2 and AO3, which are application and analysis. So as you can see here, there's been a shift left in supply from S to S1 due to increasing scarcity. At price P here, there is excess demand. And you can see that's because the quantity that firms are willing to supply at is at E1, whilst the quantity that is demanded is at E. This excess demand creates upwards pressure on prices from P to P1, which in turn signals to profit maximizing producers to increase supply, which is shown in the extension along the supply curve from E1 to P1 Q2. Similarly, the high price rations demand. Consumers reduce their quantity demanded from E to P1 Q2 again, which leads to a new equilibrium price and quantity at P1 Q2. This shows how scarcity not only creates the need to make choices, but also determines how those choices are made through the price and market mechanism. But for free goods, it simply doesn't happen. There's no price tag, no allocation problem, and no cost-benefit analysis. After all, you don't weigh up the benefits and costs of breathing air or standing in sunlight because they're free and not rationed. So the economic problem of scarcity doesn't really apply in the same way to free goods as it does to economic goods. This contrast shows how scarcity directly shapes decision-making for economic goods, but plays almost no role in how we deal with genuinely free goods. So, how do we evaluate this? Let's take a look at some of our assumptions. We're assuming that economic agents are rational when making choices. But that's not always the case, is it? In theory, scarcity helps agents make optimal decisions about resource use. But in practice, even rational individual choices can lead to collectively irrational outcomes. This is the idea behind the tragedy of the commons. And this is where scarcity becomes relevant even to free goods. Take, for example, sand on a beach. Initially, it's a free good. There's plenty of it and no price attached. But once it starts being collected in large amounts for, let's say, construction, it becomes scarce relative to demand and takes on characteristics of an economic good. It now fetches a price and needs to be managed. We can illustrate this with a negative externality diagram. The marginal private cost of using sand exceeds the marginal social cost, so sand is overconsumed by producers. From the agent's point of view, their decision is rational, but this results in overproduction, resource depletion, and long-term harm, an inefficient outcome which is shown through the shaded red area deadweight loss or deadweight welfare loss. So, what does this mean? Well, it supports the idea that the problem of scarcity doesn't just apply to economic goods. It also explains why and when free goods need to be preserved, especially when external costs build up. Scarcity, in this broader sense, drives the need for strategic, regulated choices, even in goods that start off as free. So, ultimately, the problem of scarcity can explain the requirement to make choices not just for economic goods, but for free goods as well. So let's move on to the conclusion. And this is important because in the conclusion, you're really finishing off your essay. You're connecting all your value points together and you're ranking them as to which you find most important. This will put you in strong evaluation, which will get you the top marks like 6 or 7. So here's my conclusion. Scarcity is at the heart of why we make economic decisions. It clearly explains the requirement to make choices when it comes to economic goods, because those goods are limited and have opportunity cost. But most importantly, and notice I'm saying most importantly here, because you'll have to do the same for your essay, scarcity has something to say about free goods as well, especially when those goods become overused or depleted. Clean air and sand are all examples of goods that were once free, but under pressure from human activity have become scarce. And thus decisions must be made about their allocation. Also, when everyone acts in their own self-interest, the net effect may be to deplete a resource, again creating scarcity and again resulting in choices needing to be made. So ultimately, yes, the problem of scarcity explains why there's a requirement to make choices which consider both economic goods and free goods. Okay, it's done. Thank you for watching Spec to Success. Remember, I've sat in your seat. I've seen those vague mark schemes. I've been overloaded with content. And I hope this video at least helped to clear things up even a little. If it's done that, I've done my job. And if you have any questions or suggestions, put them in the comments below. I read every single one of them and I'm very grateful for your support. Thank you.